Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. We'll just wait a few more moments as I see people are coming in. Okay, I'll get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Senna, and I am the coordinator of the Champion Mayors for Inclusive Growth Initiative within the OECD's Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions, and Cities. Welcome to day 2 of Champion Mayors Week, More Inclusion, Better Recovery. In recognition of the 5th anniversary of the Champion Mayors Initiative, each day this week will feature champion mayors in dialogue on different aspects of their COVID recovery efforts and how they are working to put inclusive growth at the center. After a great start to the week with yesterday's mayor's panel on the inclusive economic recovery post-COVID, today I am delighted to discuss with you with 3 of our champion mayors, how they are building cities that will be fit for the future and reshaping it to fit our needs post-pandemic. The spatial dimensions of cities are tremendously important. Elements such as master plans and redevelopment projects take years of planning, preparation, resources for them to be delivered. In the best case scenario, they trigger vibrancy, growth, expand access, connect neighborhoods and communities throughout the city. In the worst case scenario, they drive inequalities, cause displacement and a sense of exclusion, and are underproductive. The pandemic has acted as a catalyst for cities and their local leaders to rethink urban spaces. Discussions of the 15-minute city have circled back in response to lockdown, where some people were able to access their basic food and goods and services and necessities within their neighborhoods, while others were locked into food deserts. Actual streets in cities were reconfigured into sidewalk cafes and restaurants and for recreational use. Hundreds of kilometers or miles of cycling lanes have been added to city streets to provide climate-friendly, safe options, pandemic-safe options to getting around the city. But we're also waiting in anticipation for the dust to clear. What happens to our city districts, our central business districts, when workplaces that are considering and lifting up hybrid models change our commuting patterns and how we use these commercial spaces and zones in the day-to-day. Today's discussion will be devoted to how COVID-19 has inspired local leaders to reimagine their urban spaces to be inclusive, sustainable, safer, yes, but also adaptive, adjustable, and responsive to future needs. How are the impacts felt from COVID-19 reorienting public space? What are the long-term implications, and how are cities changing how they build and develop to be more sustainable, more inclusive, and fit for the future? To help us explore these questions, we are delighted to have here with us today 3 champion mayors: Mayor Matusz Valo from the city of Bratislava in Slovakia, Mayor Enat Kalishwatem, from the mayor of Haifa in Israel, and Mayor Libby Schaaf, the mayor of Oakland, California. Unfortunately, we were to have Mayor Sam Liccardo with us here from San Jose. However, due to an emergency situation in the city, he won't be able to join us. In this conversation, I won't be doing this alone. I have, and I'm so delighted to have with me, George McCarthy, or as we know him, Mac, the president and CEO of the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy, one of the supporting institutions of the Champion Mayors for Inclusive Growth Initiative. And with this, I give the floor to Mac to introduce himself, and I will get into some housekeeping before we give the floor to the mayors. Mac, take it away.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. So thanks, Senna, and thanks everyone for joining us. It's great to be with you and to share a little bit about the Lincoln Institute, but really more about how we feel about cities and why cities are so important to us. And I just want to set this all into a little bit of historic context, because for those of us who care about sustainability on the planet, it's been an interesting ride over the last, let's say, about 30 years or so. Starting in 1992 with the original Rio Summit on Sustainable Development, it was interesting to see that cities were actually looked at as the villains. Producers of greenhouse gases and producers of all sorts of other externalities that were threatening life on the planet. But if we fast forward 20 years to Rio Plus 20, the second Rio conference, it was really interesting how the environmental community had come around to see that cities are actually part of the solution, not part of the problem when we think about global sustainability, because we need places that we can put people that isn't going to leave them spread over the planet and following up all the other natural systems and all that we rely on for our own survival. So, and then by 2016 at the Habitat 3 conference in Quito, Ecuador, it had become clear that people were now not just looking at cities as part of the solution, but essential, that getting sustainable cities right was going to be essential for human habitation long-term on the planet. So we've come full circle. We've now seen cities move from being villains to being the solution. And that's happened probably 3 or 4 other times in history, because cities, the people in cities have had kind of a love-hate relationship for a long time. But for the Lincoln Institute, we care a lot about cities for another reason as well. And this is why we love mayors. And it's because we think that when you look at levels of government, the quality of life is actually delivered to citizens by local government. And even though lots of people obsess about what happens at the national government level, we find out that if the local government is not really doing its job, it is immediately felt by citizens. And the local government can really define not just how we lead our lives on a daily basis, but can define things like our life expectancy by making the different choices as to how we actually manage the built environment. And so for us now, we're on the crux of yet another major transition from cities as we move out of this pandemic and we think about what we're going to do in response to COVID and all of the outgrowth of COVID. And I think that for us, it's going to be really important to understand the thinking of some leading cities that have really thought about not just COVID, but all the other existential threats that cities face, and how we're going to be able to use this moment to really do the right thing long term. So you'll hear more from me later on, but I'm going to turn it back to Senna so we can get going with the mayors, because they're the ones we want to hear from. Thanks.
Thanks, Mac. Well, before we get started, just a few housekeeping rules. Participants, this session is being recorded and will be made available on the Champion Mayors platform next week. You can use the chat function to let us know if you're having any technical difficulty, but use the question and answer function if you'd like to direct any questions to the mayors. We'll be having a short Q&A session after the moderated discussion, and we'll be sure to try and address as many questions as possible. During this event, please feel free to engage us on Twitter with the handle @OECD Local and tag Champion Mayors Week. We will now move on to our panel discussion. Each speaker will have about 4 minutes to provide a brief introduction from their city's perspective. I will then give the floor to Mac to moderate the second round of discussions. When I pop up on the screen, that's a sign that we're coming to the end of the 4 minutes. But let us start with our first speaker, Mayor Matusz Balo from the city of Bratislava. Mayor, you're an architect, an urban expert. Mayor Balo was also one of the founders of City Interventions Initiative, which focused on creating small and creative concepts that have generated more than 900 projects to improve public spaces in 20 Slovak and Czech cities. Mayor Valo, how has the city of Bratislava been reimagining the shape of public space before, during, and after COVID-19? The floor is yours.
Yeah, now, thank you very much. And again, thank you for having me. And I just need to make a small reaction to what Max said, because that was one of the key elements, the key moments, what we feel that the cities are not problem anymore. We knew that cities are solution for many years, but now I feel that in European environment, but also in Americas, everybody understand it, and that this is one of the biggest, let's say, challenges which came from the crisis for us. So we became more in a central position in resolving this problem. A crisis made us adjust many decisions, as well the direction of our project and policies. The struggle, of course, to protect the most vulnerable groups of the population while ensuring the running of the city was very demanding in terms of our effort and funding. But it also showed us what a splendid team of people ready to provide the assistance we have around us. And that was one of the very important moments of the crisis for us. In particular, it revealed the amazing spirit of solidarity and responsibility of Bratislavienses, the citizen of Bratislava. And Corona crisis also has shown how much reliance the inhabitants place on the towns where they live. That's something I mentioned before. The helping hand of the state proved not to be sufficient in Slovakia. We admit that both the new government that took office a year ago and all of us were facing an unprecedented situation. We have to deal with the problems we had not been able to prepare for in advance, but we must always lay emphasis on the importance of information and its timely delivery to the people. So, of course, if we are, this was a small introduction, but if we are, and today we will talk about public space, of course, not only. I think the most important message I have, and I think also other cities have, that public space and its absolutely pivotal importance in the life of our cities is still there. Everybody was looking forward to go back to the public space. Everybody, and this is not the first time when any kind of crises are impacting the use and the form of public space. But what I believe as an architect, that we're just going to change it in some way, maybe in terms of hygiene, maybe in terms of safety on some policies. But what is important, that public space is still there, will be there, like in the past, also in the future, and will be one of the key elements of the life of our citizen in our cities, social, democratic, and all others. So we are ready to go back to the public space. I spent many months in the empty old town because everybody was very disciplined and the city was empty, but now everybody's keen to go back and restart our lives in public space.
Thank you, Mayor Valo. It's very true. Everybody's waiting to get out and be social responsibly, but definitely use public space once again. Thank you. Our second speaker is Mayor Kalish Rotem, the mayor of Haifa. She has launched several urban renewal projects, including Haifa Riviera City, Ramat Shul, and Kiryat Shprinzek. and has inherited the rehabilitation of several key boulevards within the cities. You've popped up bicycle lanes and bike paths throughout the city. Mayor Kalish, we're excited that you've been able, please tell us how you are planning to reshape public space in Haifa post-COVID-19.
Thank you, Sana, and thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so excited to be here. I stepped into office 2.5 years ago and started at once to promote all sorts of urban renewal projects. At the moment, we have around 40 very important projects of low social income neighborhoods, neighborhoods that reside along the seashore, that we want to connect to the sea, of course. We have neighborhoods that are next to the sea, but they don't have accessibility to the sea, which is crazy because of public transportation, railways and stuff like that. We started promoting a new accessibility projects and public transportation and education master plans and tourist master plans. So we started looking at the city in a very wide scale and large scale projects. And then, of course, COVID-19 came just around a year and a half after starting to work on these very wide and large scale projects. And then we immediately went into short-term projects, doing with public spaces, taking places of parking spaces and giving them to, putting them, locating their desks, tables, storage tables and places to sit for restaurants, for coffee shops. We initiated food truck project to locate all sorts of small businesses moving in all sorts of places around the city. And we brought some food trucks into the to the sea, to the seashore, a place where people could be without the fear of getting the pandemic, because we needed very open spaces and open air and clean air and places where people could walk out. We also closed a few streets and turned them to pedestrian streets, and we realized that the businesses started flourishing. And we had all sorts of other, perhaps I will talk afterwards, projects to help small businesses. So from thinking large-scale projects, we entered very small and local and very ad hoc and very immediate projects. And all of a sudden we realized that these are all intertwined and they work together. And we are willing to continue working on this on both levels. So that's more or less, and we had also a very big challenge to those who don't know Haifa. It's a true multicultural city with many religions, Arabs, Muslims and Christians and Jews and Druze and Baha'is, and everybody's living here. So when we approach to the people, we have many communities here. And also during the pandemic, we had to see that they all have their places and spaces within the city. So that was a big challenge, but a very happy one.
Thank you, Mayor Kalish Rotem, and reminding us that the dimensionality of public space also sustains us. I move to our third mayor, third and final mayor, Mayor Schaaf. Thank you for joining us today. We know that you and Oakland have overseen several initiatives that are shifting the dimensions of public space, from community cabins that address housing and homelessness to the promotion of public transport as part of your climate plan, and major developing projects such as the Gateway Industrial District. Please, could you shed some light on how COVID-19 has provoked changes and how you are managing and using public space in the city of Oakland?
Thank you. And I love your question. How did COVID provoke changes? Because while COVID-19 has been so tragic, we've all suffered such losses, it also presented some incredible opportunities. And liberating our roads for the people was one of the kind of silver linings of this otherwise tragic year. For those of you who don't know Oakland, California, we are part of the San Francisco Bay Area, a metro region of just under 8 million people. That includes San Francisco and Silicon Valley. Oakland itself has a population of about 440,000, just under 500,000. And it has some of the best weather in the world, very mild climate. And we are very proud to be one of the most racially diverse cities in America. Roughly 1/4 white, 1/4 Black, 1/4 Latino, 1/4 Asian and mixed race, and more integration than you would find in other cities. On March 17th, the Bay Area region was the first in the United States to issue a shelter-in-place order. March 17th, the whole Bay Area shut down. And it was only 3.5 weeks later that we announced one of the most ambitious slow streets programs. And I want to be honest that COVID also gave us permission as government to not be, as careful or as fancy as we would be during normal times. Actually, some of my staff borrowed my own minivan, put, sawhorses, traffic barriers in the back, and drove around to establish Oakland's first slow streets. Not a typical public works project. But we had just done the analysis of the traffic patterns for our entire city as part of our bike route program. So we took that data and used it to select the appropriate streets to close to through traffic so that we could immediately create safe outdoor spaces for people to recreate in close to their homes. It was amazing. Part of our commitment to racial equity in Oakland is to create a sense of belonging and for people to have a safe space to come with their families, to roller skate, scooter, bike, and see one another, but in a safe, socially distant space was exactly what we needed as a city during this very frightening time. But we didn't stop there. We went back to those communities and asked how this intervention was working for them, whether these slow streets were creating a sense of community, a sense of safety, an outlet for exercise and for mental health. And in some neighborhoods, these were celebrated. In others, the communities felt like we really weren't addressing their greater need. And so we iterated, we pivoted very quickly in response to what we heard from the community. So in some of our neighborhoods that were lower income, neighborhoods that have been traditionally our Black and Latino neighborhoods, they had more concerns about being able to get to the most important places in the neighborhood safely. the neighborhood grocery stores, the neighborhood laundromats that so many people still needed to go to keep clothes clean. And of course, very important during COVID, pharmacies. And so we created something called essential streets. And we used just our basic orange safety cones to create a slowdown at crosswalks in major areas that we knew had high incidence of traffic accidents, so that people could walk more safely to get to the essential places that they needed to. I hope I get a chance to talk more about the other ways that we liberated our streets from cars and gave them back to the people, as well as to commerce and culture. Max said earlier that people used to see cities as the villains in climate change, and now we are the heroes. I'd like to say that about our roads. When you look from space, the surface of Oakland, the surface, 1/4 of it is roads. How are we using that incredible gift that belongs to our whole community? Before, roads were really villains of health, with traffic accidents and pollution and a worse quality of life. Now, we are seeing roads as heroes, places where people can exercise, be more healthy, be in community. And we're starting to see these slow streets host little community gardens with herb gardens for the whole block. We're seeing small marketplaces pop up and celebrations of culture. So that is what I hope we can see, is our roads become our health heroes. That is an opportunity that COVID gave us.
Thank you, Mayor Schaaf, for giving us a little bit of a picture of how Oakland reused the streets, how you service different communities differently depending on their needs for public space. And I'm sure Mac will dig into that with you later. Before we turn to the moderated discussion, and I leave you all in Mac's good hands momentarily, I'd like to launch a poll to the audience, to those who are viewing in, to find out how you're thinking, how you experienced public space where you live. So what area of public space has changed the most in your city due to the COVID-19 pandemic? Reduced traffic in central business districts due to teleworking, expanded bike lanes, additional green space, expanded access to outdoor space for dining, recreation, pedestrians, cultural activities. And if you have other examples of how public space was used, please let us know using the chat function. Tell us more. We still have, we'll keep it open for another, let's say 15 seconds while folks let us know how public space, what area of public space changed, transformed the most in your city due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And it looks like we have a front runner, but we'll give it maybe 5 more seconds. Can we close the panel, please? The poll, please. So reduced traffic in the central business district due to teleworking. So we were speaking before about the possibility of hybrid models changing our use of central business districts and the commercial areas. And it seems like people are in agreement, followed by expanded access to outdoor space for dining, recreation, pedestrians, and culture. And I hope you all are taking advantage of the use of roads, as Mayor Schaaf said, in recreation, expanded bike lanes that resulted hopefully in reduced car traffic, and additional green spaces. And so with this, thank you all for participating in this poll. With this, I give the floor to Mac to start in the moderated discussion with our panelists.
Thanks again, Senna, and thanks to the mayors who are fascinating examples that we can kind of build on in this discussion. So, one thing about COVID was that it really brought some long-standing urban problems into sharper contrast, right? So in other words, you might think of COVID as just another overlay that we put on the map to kind of describe or illustrate the cost of inequality. And if you look at the spatial kind of organization of COVID and COVID mortality, it overlays almost perfectly with all sorts of other kind of negative consequences of inequality, whether it's the experience of urban heat island effects, or whether it's just kind of the location of the people who are poorly housed or impoverished, or what the World Bank calls compounded risks, right? But not only did COVID expose a lot of urban vulnerabilities, but it also generated some myths that we're going to have to deal with as we look forward. And one of the biggest myths was this idea that it's actually urban density that is the problem, not a solution, and that we have to kind of come to grips with the fact that dense development leaves us really exposed to pandemics. And as it turns out, if you look at the data, some of the densest urban areas in the world did not experience really high degrees of COVID mortality. And that's because of the way we behaved, not because of the way we organized ourselves in space. And so this is kind of a warning that, and this also is something that's been echoed by the World Bank, where they say that cities' plans to recover and rebuild from COVID-19 must strive to address long-standing vulnerabilities and go beyond addressing the health impacts of COVID to tackle the persistent inequalities that the poor and vulnerable contend with on a daily basis. So for us, it's really important that we get our responses right, because we don't want to create the next unanticipated negative consequence that we'll need to deal with in the future. And we don't want to just build whatever we're going to build post-COVID, new structures on kind of faulty foundations. So that, I want to turn to the mayors and just ask about investments that you're making in your public spaces, and what are the important investments you made in your public spaces that your city has made in response to the pandemic, and how do you think you're going to be able to sustain those investments after people kind of forget about the panic and the worry that was associated with COVID? And so we'll start with Mayor Kalish Rotem from Haifa. I know you talked a little bit about recovering your waterfront, and I'm wondering, are there other plans to really change the spatial orientation in a more permanent way that are going to help to address not just COVID vulnerabilities, but other kind of long-standing vulnerabilities in your community?
Yeah, I think in a few levels, I will try to answer in a few ways. First, all our urban renewal plans have changed dramatically the way we see space. The mixed use, for example, which is not something very popular in Israel, is now in every plan in Haifa. I actually took all the plans and started, we nearly started them fresh. And mixed use, multi-layered city for me is something that I cannot even imagine. I'm also an architect and urban planner. So all these high-rise neighborhoods and parking lots were, thrown away, all these plans. And we are talking about mixed use. We're talking about public transportation. We're talking about streets and walkability and distances. We're now working on all sorts of working centers of districts that people can work close to their neighborhoods and perhaps need less cars per family. So these were significant and very, very deep changes in the way we started dealing with the planning issues. I think this is one thing. We're talking about really sustainable planning. We're talking about walking distances. For example, we started doing it before COVID-19, but we got the approval from the government to reduce taxes to people who work from their houses. Their offices are part of their apartment, which is something very new here in Israel, because I would like to encourage these sustainable way of living. And I know that for many people, especially if they hold some creative enterprise, they get a lot of help with taxes. We had all sorts of projects like that. But I think the most, let's say, even banal things, but they were a great, I don't know, event. They were hyped because we just took the street furniture, very simple street furniture that you can find in forests and places like that. We took them and we just painted them in all sorts of colors. And we started just, throwing them in all sorts of streets and public places, and usually near small businesses. And then we just hanged a few lights above to add a little more light to the place. And it was just a crazy event, because all of a sudden, all sorts of streets changed significantly, and no more cars. And I think the most amazing thing that happened in our city is that people used to go to the shopping mall. It was like, that was the place to go to shop. And all of a sudden we see more and more people on the streets. So for me, that was actually my dream, but seeing it happen, and in a way, because of COVID-19, or it happened it happened more quickly. It was an amazing thing to do. We also had other projects. It's a cashback project. We give some small payment back to the people of Haifa who shop in local businesses. So you get a refund if you buy at local businesses. So this is our way to help promote our small businesses and help the economy in a way which was severely damaged, of course, in this year. Well, I don't know, there are many more.
No, thanks. That's super helpful. So, Mayor Schaaf, back in the the economic crisis of 2009 and 10, we were frequently, people were frequently heard saying, "Or crisis is a terrible thing to waste," and why don't we use a crisis as an opportunity to do something new? And you've already mentioned that you've been able to kind of reclaim your streets in Oakland as a result of kind of the reduction in traffic and all that. But I'm wondering, what else did COVID do to give you kind of the space to think more creatively? And will those creative changes sustain, or are they going to be, when the cars come back, are we going to have to be now contesting the use of those streets again?
We are committed to keeping these changes where our residents want them. And that is such an important part of this process, is to be in authentic communication with all your communities, because different communities might feel differently. That was something we learned very early on. Another thing that happened during COVID that we had not planned, that we did not ask for, because the slow streets, that was our program. We were excited about it. But you see in my virtual background, Lake Merritt, which is literally on the edge of our downtown, as well as a residential district. Well, it felt like the whole world needed to hang out at Lake Merritt. And as people were desperate, people lost their jobs during COVID. We saw overnight a marketplace pop up on Lake Merritt. And let's be honest, it caused conflicts. We started having traffic jams. We had unpermitted food and propane takes and barbecues and rock concerts going on in our beautiful park without the benefit of governmental regulation. But also during COVID, we as government wanted to give grace. And what I mean by that is particularly after the murder of George Floyd by a police officer, actually 1 year ago exactly yesterday. This idea of government as an enforcer was something we were very sensitive to. And so we took that new love and attraction to our lake and the green spaces around it, and we worked with it. We worked with the Black Vendors Association to actually do permits for them at no cost and to move this commercial activity to a part of the lake where it wouldn't cause traffic conflicts. In fact, we shut down a whole street to create a new marketplace there. And so those are the kinds of things that we've had to do during COVID. But another gift is a mind shift of government as an enabler, as someone who actually takes what the community wants and does not say no, but says, this is how you can do this activity without unreasonably impacting the other stakeholders that also have a right to this public space. And so the commercial implications of public space, the cultural implications of public space, we try to welcome them and manage them and not shut them down.
And not to mention the health implications of outdoor space, as we found that it's very low probability that COVID could be spread outdoors, right? So it's good to get people outdoors and interacting.
And that's why we didn't want to shut it down. Although we did say to people, like, give the lake a break, try your slow street, try and go someplace else, because it was pretty overwhelming at one point, I'll say.
So Mayor Vallow, in Bratislava, you have a very kind of interesting kind of geographic position, because you're there kind of very close to Vienna, very close to Hungary, very, straddling the Danube. And I'm wondering, so a couple of questions for you. One thing that we saw in the United States after COVID was this tendency for public space to become kind of flexibly used space, where like restaurants would spill out onto streets and start building, igloos and tables for people to eat at, and parking spaces to be taken up by other, small business uses and all that. But the other thing we saw is, of course, a complete change in the commercial employment orientation, where everybody was working at a distance. And I'm wondering, to what extent have you seen a much more flexible orientation of your citizens in Bratislava to all those things, no longer having to commute into Vienna, being able to work at home, now demanding more local services, thinking about more flexible uses of land around them? Is that something that's been happening, or is it something you're anticipating that's going to happen as you move forward? Oh, you're on mute. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much for the question. Bratislava has unofficially around 600,000 inhabitants, and there is nearly zero rate unemployment. There is zero unemployment rate in Bratislava, and this is also true that part of people are working in Vienna, which is 45 minutes by train, which is like in the scale of America, of United States, is like one city. But the main possibilities to work are in Bratislava. You need to understand that we have one of the European headquarters of Dell or IBM or HP in Bratislava. A lot of people already work at home and doing the telework. So what happened in Bratislava, that the first thing I need to say, that we took the COVID very seriously from the first day, not only the city, but mainly our citizens. So our main outcome is that we have just fantastic people which are be able to be super disciplined. And in fact, we were one of the best capital cities in Europe after the first wave in terms of number of deaths or people who were sick with COVID. And when I'm talking about this, you need to also understand the environment which we are using the public space. And between the 1947 and 1989, it was a totalitarian regime where the regime was dictating when we are going to use the public space. The public space, which is not only our outdoor living room, but is mainly the place for democracy for me. And I saw as a child the Velvet Revolution in Bratislava. I saw it in the squares where before it was nobody was prohibited to be there. And in one moment there was 100,000 people in the square. So for us as public space, also this kind of special meaning. And and it's also true that we also start to do all the things also other cities are doing to be very flexible in use of public space. For example, we are giving for free double. If restaurant has a terrace, outdoor dining, we are giving it now this year, also last year for free, and we are doubling it. So of course they can be outdoor, and all these small helps we can give them. But the thing is that there wasn't big pressure, mainly in the first wave, to be outdoor. The people were so cautious, so disciplined. They were just home, and that was incredible. And maybe you saw it. There was around the internet this crazy pictures from a super empty Bratislava. Like it was very empty for really first 2-3 months from February to May 2020. Of course, the second wave was very much more difficult because people are already fed up and they just want to live their lives. And now we have a very good rate of vaccination, so it's happening. But our main goal was to protect our people, and there was the two groups: was elderly people and our homeless people. And of course, this is also connected with public space because we are promoting public space for elderly people, and one of their key element of their lives is going to walk outside together in groups and have some culture. And we had very strict rules starting in February 2020. There was of course, no visits, because we have 1,200 clients in elderly centers. So what we did, we organized a concert for these elderly people under the balconies, outside concert. They were looking at it from the windows for their balconies. This is the small thing. This was a small interaction in public space. They cannot walk in the public space, but they can live what is happening in public space through the music, for example. And of course, we built a quarantine city, a small city for a city, as a small center in the first wave was for 400 people. In the second wave, which was much worse in the end, for 200 people, for homeless people, because if they became sick, they don't have place to go, and they became a threat for themselves, also for others. So these are the areas where we were really concentrating ourselves. And of course, what we did was cleanliness and order of public areas, new sanitation points, and all the stuff. Testing, maybe you know it, but Slovakia was one of the most tested country in the world. We had like a lot of testing going on. It was all free, and me as a mayor, I was tested nearly during the first few months, nearly every day. But what is important, I want to go back to what my fellow colleagues say, Mayor Shaft, about the opportunities. And for me, I'm the one of them. My main program was fight the cars. That's the problem of the East European, Central European city. The cars are everywhere. They are parked everywhere. Many people are using cars, and I'm doing it. And it's everybody who is in this business as me knows that it's not very popular. That it's very difficult to explain to people that car is not the right, the parking space is not this human right, you know. And that the trees are better, and everybody wants a tree instead of public space, but it cannot be in front of their houses, you know. So it's and the COVID give us opportunity to show to people the streets and the city without the cars, and that's something I think that this is something very important, that people understand. Okay, we can have this street, and maybe there don't need to be the cars all the time on the street, because you know car traffic was going down. And this was something very interesting for us.
So that actually brings up an interesting point, because one of the big losers in the COVID pandemic was public transportation. And in almost every city in the world, public transportation ridership fell by 50, 60, in some cases 90%. And it's starting to come back a little bit, but it's still, there's real concerns whether even public transportation systems are ever going to be economic again because of these problems. So how do you all imagine people getting around your cities now? Is there a new kind of multi-mode kind of transport systems in your heads? Or are there a lot more ride sharing? I mean, how are we going to move people around? Or are we just going to try to keep them in 15-minute neighborhoods, walking around, being able to kind of live, you know, get everything they need within a 15-minute walk? I don't know. So why don't we start with you, Mayor Schaaf? What are you thinking about how people are going to get around your city?
We think people will come back to using public transit. And we recognize during COVID that many of our workers had to take public transit. And it really showed us where our essential workers are living and working, because there were certain transit lines that even during the worst time of the pandemic were still being used a lot. In fact, we had to reduce service because of the funding, the revenue impacts. And we've had problems where the buses have had to leave people still waiting at the bus stop because they had already taken up the maximum allowed healthy number of people to be inside the bus. So we are not seeing a drop off of use, especially with our lower wage, lower income workers who rely on public transit. And so it is helping us as we build back the system, thinking about equity, thinking about who is dependent on our transit system versus who chooses to use it when it's most convenient for them. And so that's the kind of work we're going to continue to do. I think all of our cities are having an equity reckoning to really recognize that we have not invested enough in certain neighborhoods, in our low-income neighborhoods. We have not done enough to dismantle systems of institutionalized racism. And that is work that Oakland is very passionate about. And systemic racism is also in our public transit systems. And this has given us an opportunity to learn more about how we can change that. So I'm excited about the return to public transit. I sit on the region's transportation authority. So the whole Bay Area is 101 cities in 9 counties. Again, that 8 million people number. So we are working to also create a more integrated system, because the different cities have had different public transportation systems. And that is another opportunity in COVID, where we really saw the need to integrate all those systems to be more seamless as workers are being forced to live farther and farther away from job centers because of the high cost of housing in our core cities. So that is really our work ahead. But COVID gave us some very valuable information about who is transit dependent so that we can serve them first and best.
So how about Haifa, Mayor Kalish Rotem? What is the future of transport there?
It's a very important issue. Of course, when the city was in the lockdown, there was no public transit at all. It was stopped. But most of the people who were forced to continue working, like for example, in hospitals, nurses and you know, so many people in the hospitals, and they needed the public transportation. And we had a serious issue with a way to help these people move around and get to the work, because they were really crucial in what they did. So that was in the first phase of the pandemic and the lockdown. We were lucky because we started some initiative just before the beginning of the pandemic with actually a very interesting idea that we developed together with the bus company in the city, in Haifa. It's very small buses that stop only in bus stops, but they have very flexible lines. And you just call them with your cell phone, and they can host, I don't know, they can accommodate 5 to 10 people, that's all. So it's like a taxi, but it's a little more sophisticated. It works through the mobile cell phone, and it only works on bus stops. So we started that initiative, and it just saved us during the pandemic. Because these were very small vehicles that just took maybe 1 or 2 people because, you know, people could not enter the same space together. They just helped us to move people, especially those who were in how do you say, important jobs, especially in the hospitals. We also opened places for kindergartens for the people in the hospitals, for the doctors and the nurses. So we tried to look after their children. So all we did was to see how we help the people who had to go to work. So that's one thing. And the idea of small buses that have flexible lines was just an enormous thing for us during the pandemic. And it still works now. In Israel, most of the people are vaccinated, and now we can say that the pandemic is in a very low, I don't know, but nearly, I think we only have 19 people in the city with the disease. So now everybody's getting back to life, and this system, this transit system, is just an amazing thing. Everybody got used to it, and everybody loves it. Another thing that we're starting to do, and we missed, we did not manage to do it during the pandemic, but we set and we started doing all the plans, and now we're on it, is to put escalators in all sorts of places. Haifa is built on the slope of a mountain, quite a high mountain, and many neighborhoods are, you know, sitting in different levels. And the city center we have all sorts of centers, and they are divided. And now we're starting to connect all sorts of places within the city with escalators. So that was also something we realized we need to do during the pandemic, and hopefully no more pandemics for at least the next century. But we hope that we will have more accessibility opportunities for people.
Yeah, in Medellin, they did a great job with escalators as a way to connect neighborhoods as well, and it made a gigantic difference of really being able to introduce neighborhoods that have been kind of locked out of economic opportunity to find their way into the mainstream. And it was just it was one physical kind of intervention that made all the difference, right? So it's interesting. So what about Bratislava? What is your transport situation? Are you looking at this last mile connectivity with the small buses that they have in Haifa? That sounds like an interesting model to take a look at, huh?
I mean, it's definitely an interesting model, but we are doing something else. The funny story is that we just finished during the first days of lockdown in the second wave. In mostly part of the Europe was between September and now, actually. We were opening the reconstructed, very important tram line, which cost us 60 million of euros, and I was opening it with the public and everything during the first, just one day before the lockdown. So imagine all these are hopes, and we're very looking forward. We have a tram during the peak hour, which is coming every 2 minutes, which is very good. And we during the worst month we have minus 80% in our public transport of people, and now we're still losing 2.5 million euros per month. But we decided to pay it all, not to stop, not to fire nobody, not to use everything we can to hold on public transport, because for us it's the only way have to solve the cars problem. You know, there's no other way in Bratislava. We are city with a historical center, and we cannot make streets bigger, and we already know that making more space for cars just mean more cars. So and for us the vaccination is the thing where also we as a city working a lot of on the communication level and explaining that people need to be vaccinated, because we are counting on the fact that in September we will go back in the public transport in the much bigger numbers. And again, it's never going to be, of course, it's never going to be make a profit, but we want to people have back. And of course, what we did, the 1 year ticket, we made it cheaper, 25%. So we also working on the level of money, and now we hope we are working a lot on public transportation, cameras in every buses, every tram, the air conditioning in every car, a lot of stuff, you know, a lot of new things. And of course, it's all stopped by pandemic, but we are continuing to do that. And I still believe after the pandemic, we can restart our public transportation.
So Senna, as you know, I could talk all day, and I'm happy to do so, but should I be moving on to the next poll question, or should I ask one more question for the mayors?
You can ask one more question, and then we can move to the poll.
Okay. So mayors, one of the reasons, I think this is about 15 years ago now, that my first encounter with OECD was at this meeting that we hosted in Chicago called Mayors and Ministers. And one of the things that the OECD, if you don't know, was at the time almost entirely focused on national governments, and national government ministers were really kind of the folks that they cared most about. But they realized how important it was to try to find alignment between local governments and national governments. And in order to do that, they had to initiate conversations. And so it's interesting to me to think about now, kind of after 15 years later, we've had these really, really productive conversations between local governments and national governments, and sometimes intermediated by, say, state governments in places like the United States. And so I'm wondering, from your point of view, as you now kind of emerge into this new era of possibilities that have been opened up by COVID, the pandemic, the new flows of resources that are coming down, what do you need from your national government to enable you to do your best work at the local level. How can the national government or the state governments in the United States really kind of help you do what you need to do to serve your constituents, your residents, the best? And we'll start with you, Mayor Kalish Rodham. How can the national government in Israel help you to serve Haifa the best?
I would say something, but I'm quite serious. I would ask them just to not interfere. I think that we know our people, we know the problems, we know very well what they need. Sometimes when our national or central government, they came up with all sorts of bylaws and demands, and they were just not right for the city or the people of the city, or all sorts of situations that turned out to be ridiculous. So we had somehow to adjust between bylaws that, they had their sense of value, and they had some logic, but when it came into to practice, we sometimes felt very big gaps. So I would say just, give us the direction and not interfere. That's one thing. And the other is to open the budgets. And for example, to put these street furniture, to change the lighting in the streets so people can go into new places during hours that they were not used to. Open all sorts of services to people in very small scale, not to to tens of people, but to individuals. These things cost money, and we needed more support when it came to that. I'm not even talking about the small businesses that we started some initiatives to help them because they were in a very, very bad state. So helping the economy. So there was a lot of tension between the central government in Israel and all the local municipalities. I think eventually everybody said that the local government was doing a magnificent job, because we are connected to the people, we're connected to the streets, and we see people, we talk to them, we know what they want. We have, a free way to discuss, to sit, to talk to them. So I think at some point they just realized that in our central government and just gave us more and more freedom. So that was more or less the process.
Flexibility is always a good thing. And flexibility has been a theme that's been running through this entire conversation. Flexible land uses, flexible kinds of thinking that we need to do. And that's good. Flexibility from the national government would be a good thing too. So how about in Slovakia? How can the Slovakian government help you, Mayor Valo, to really do your best to serve the folks of Bratislava?
I mean, what is absolutely, what is absolutely amazing for me, and I think I'm part of the Bloomberg's network of mayors, so I have a lot of contacts with mayors from different part of wards, that the exact words Mayor of Haifa just said are my words. It's exactly like this. Even if Haifa is all in another part of the world, or on different part of the world, I mean, the situation was exactly the same. Just not interfere. That's important for us. Just we know what to do. We are close to the citizen. They are always asking us questions. They're never going to meet our prime minister in the street, but they're every day meeting me in the street. They're mayor. So that's the small thing. You already know that the level and the scale of our involvement is just different. And of course, the conflict, which now was evident between central government and local municipalities was clear, and was also clear that we, and I don't want to sound too big about it, but we saved the situation during the COVID, definitely. The municipalities saved the situation with testing, with communication. There wasn't very good campaign from our central government, and with the understanding of the real needs of our citizens, which is we are just more close to the people and not interfere. And in my case, in case of Bratislava, we need more power in deciding how we are going direct traffic in our cities. Just a small example, which is absurd. If I want to do a bus lane or bicycle lane, I need a state police for that. They need to give me permission, and it taking a month to have this permission. So I'm the one of the cities which cannot say that we create kilometers of new bike lanes, because it's just not true, because we need permission of our state, of our government, and they just looking always old school, in an old school way. They're just looking on the cars. They need to move the cars. People are not interesting for them. So this is it. And exact the same words. Thank you very much.
So Mayor Schaaf, same question to you. What can the US government or the California government do for Oakland to help you serve your population?
Well, let me just say, at the beginning of this pandemic, Donald Trump was the president. He was the most evil, horrible leader that the United States has ever had. He hated cities. He tried to put me in jail personally, like by name. So we did not feel any support from the national government. And I will give credit to our governor of California, Gavin Newsom, who really did help California get through those first critical months of the pandemic. And when we talk about the public space, another benefit of not having cars around is we stood up huge testing sites and then vaccination sites in parking lots, in city-owned parking lots. But we just had to go and raise the money privately, figure out how to stand them up, because the federal government was not a help at all at the beginning of the pandemic. Now we had an election, and now we have a new president. And oh my God, if you had any questions about the power of democracy, look at the United States of America, because we now have a president who is providing tremendous support to cities. And when we think about what an equitable recovery looks like, I appreciate that President Joe Biden and his vice president, who we are very proud was born in Oakland, California, Kamala Harris, their slogan is Build Back Better. And our federal government is, for the first time, making unprecedented amounts of money available directly to cities. I also want to just thank the other mayors. During the first part of the pandemic, the mayors of the 13 largest cities in California, and that includes, Los Angeles and Sacramento and San Jose and San Diego, San Francisco, we did a Zoom call every single night, 7 days a week for the first several months, because we were not getting help from our national government. So we helped each other with good ideas, with lobbying the state for resources and assistance. One great thing the state of California did, I know Mayor was talking about helping the homeless population, because tourism stopped in our cities. We had these hotels that were empty. Well, we turned those in to shelter for our homeless people. We got thousands of people off the streets right at the beginning of COVID by utilizing hotels. So, but now we're in such a better place, having the national government actually trying to help cities rather than hating cities makes a world of difference.
So that's interesting. In the absence of vertical alignment with the national government, you went the horizontal alignment across the cities in your state, which is good. And hopefully that will persist even after the alignment with the national government gets restored. But I guess the motto from this part of the discussion is we should have a Hippocratic oath for national governments. First, do no harm, right? And then we'll see what else we can do to be helpful, right? All right, Senna, I think it's time to turn to the poll question number 2. And I guess somebody will put it up on the screen and I'll kind of read out. So here's the question. What is your city's biggest challenge to reorienting public space? And you got to pick one. The built environment, in other words, updating infrastructure, mixed use development, street design. Number 2, dependency on private vehicles. Number 3, regulations and permitting. In other words, outdoor dining, micro mobility, operator registration. Number 4, lack of public domain. In other words, converting vacant lots to green space, converting empty commercial space to housing, or other. If you have another, you're gonna have to describe it in the chat for us. So we'll give you about, I don't know, 30 seconds to kind of make your choices here. And after those choices are made, they're gonna pop up the results on the screen and I'll tell you what the winner was of those reorienting public space challenges. Vote early, vote often. Get in there. Okay, do we have results? Here we go. The biggest challenge is the built environment, updating infrastructure, mixed use development, street design. Not a surprise. I mean, everybody knows we've had an infrastructure crisis ongoing for the last 40 years globally, and I guess it's time to maybe address it. And maybe we'll be able to summon the political will to do so now that people are focused on it. So thank you all for your votes. And then now, Senna, do we want to turn to questions from the audience?
Yes, exactly. And I have a few lined up that have come through the Q&A form. And this one is for all mayors. We've heard a bit from Mayor Vallow about some interruptions to investments that have been planned and even executed during COVID, in particular the transit line that they built and lifted and opened and launched right before the pandemic. And we were wondering, a question comes in about what else, what are you looking to reinstate? What projects and programs are you looking to ignite again post-pandemic that were maybe interrupted, that are particularly aligned to how you use public space? And could I ask Mayor Kalish Rotem if there's anything that has been interrupted that you are ready to get back into as a part of because of COVID?
I think I started with the saying that when I stepped into office, we started with large-scale projects, with master plans, and with rethinking about the structure, the transportation, and the renewal of the city and most of its neighborhoods. And of course, we are eager to continue with that. Not everybody was working. It was this year actually made it more difficult to promote these projects. Although I have to say that the Zoom, this brilliant thing just first managed to bring everybody close together as we do now. So we also continued working on the long-term and the large-scale projects. And of course, this is what we want to do. I have to say that the pandemic taught me that all the things we wanted to promote before are relevant. the mixed use, the sustainable development, the public transportation. Of course, there were changes. We now, we don't enjoy being in crowds at the moment. There is some psychological fear of being in crowds. So we look more at small places, placemaking. In every neighborhood, we wanted to do something very small for a very small group of people who can use the places. So I think the scale is a little different, but the sustainable ideas, the sustainable development ideas are relevant more than ever. And what we are all willing to do is to return to normal life and continue working as hard as we can to promote all the things that we started before the pandemic.
Thank you, Mayor Kalishwadam. And I go to Mayor Vallo. You mentioned the transport being interrupted, but what are your hopes for what public space looks like in Bratislava now and in the future? What are you hoping for?
Thank you very much. One of our biggest investment during this year and next year is in the public space. What we're actually doing, we are creating a lot of different new plazas or piazzetti. We are calling it a new. We have a new bench, a special bench with a gift from Prague. There are only 2 cities in the world with this special design bench. So all the stuff was very important for us also before, and we are investing in it. And of course, as I mentioned, I'm an architect. So the public space was always changing during the history with different limitation because of some action or because of something which happened. But in the end, my hopes are clear. I already seeing it. People want to go back to public space. There will be, of course, some COVID limitations, some fears. The thing will be maybe a little bit slower, but in the end, people will be back in public space. That's for sure. I mean, if I'm only imagining that how people were sad, not angry, just sad when we cancel our Christmas market, which is the beautiful 1 month Christmas market, also, which is also in different cities, in every city. People are looking forward, even if we have different kind of weathers, not only hot summer. People want to be outside. It's important for them. And I think that's it. That's my answer. Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Vallo. And Mayor Schaaf, last question to you before we end here. The Q&A generated a lot of questions on your Slow Streets program, and as well as how you engaged with residents to understand their needs. Can you elaborate on that a little bit, how you use the feedback from residents and how you will be using it to adapt the physical space?
Sure. Oakland is very fortunate to have a lot of nonprofit organizations, non-governmental organizations that are doing work deep in communities. And we've made an effort to not just work with the big ones, but some of the really small ones that particularly connect with very unique groups, like African immigrants is one group of Oaklanders that we want to be able to hear from. But we did something very old-fashioned as politicians. It's familiar to us, but it's something that city government doesn't always do. We actually created a door hanger with a survey and put it on people's doorknobs because we couldn't knock on doors and talk. That made people very uncomfortable. We used these door hangers. And even during COVID, we got more participation in residents from our lower income neighborhoods, the traditional neighborhoods with people of color. to propose capital improvement projects in their neighborhoods. So I was excited to see more engagement. Even as we moved our public meetings from in person at City Hall to on Zoom, we actually saw more people participate in city government because now we have digital connection and more people are connected. So those were some of the great advances for hearing from people. We also created very simple textable surveys. So not requiring an internet connection, but actually could be done by a simple text message exchange. That was another tool we used. And we used the slow streets to kind of advertise how people, because obviously people who are at the slow street are going to have opinions about them. So we put the signs about where to take the public opinion survey on the slow street barriers. So that worked very well also. Those were some of the things we used, and we're going to continue because it is so important to have this dialogue with your community and to recognize that different parts of your city may feel very differently about a particular program or intervention.
Thank you, Mayor Schaaf. Thank you, Mayor Vallo. Thank you, Mayor Kalish Rotem. Thank you, Mac, for joining us today for Fit for the Future, day 2 of the Champion Mayors Week. More inclusion, better recovery. Well, I've certainly been convinced that the things that are happening in cities, both big and small, short-term, medium-term, and long-term, are putting residents at the center,